Now, can we go back to the Housing First proposal? Very good. Lester, come forward. Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you.
We'll start with the Housing First.
Thank you. My apologies for not being available earlier.
That's it, yeah. So
All right. Just means we were going faster than you thought we would.
We are, which is, yes. So,
right.
Councillors, I'd like to start by really just talking about this, the Housing First initiative as a real issue. Like, I think having a home is something that we as councillors take for granted. And in fact, though, the term homelessness, which we're addressing, it's actually about real people who've got nowhere to live in our city. And many of the people who have been homeless, in fact, some of them have been without a home for over 20 years. So, and they're people who sleep rough, and they sleep under bridges, and they sleep in parks and under trees. And clearly, you know, if we can improve their situation, the issues like their health issues, both mental and physical, stand for improvement and everybody benefits. The people who are homeless, they won't have a real family. Family have been burned off, often a long time ago, or any relatives who they have had. So the only family they have end up being people like themselves who are termed streeties. And the people we're talking about often feel forgotten and hopeless, and they resort to alcohol and drugs as their only kind of solace. So I guess too, though, it's more recently that central government and we as a council and certainly our community are saying that there's a lot of concerns about the impact on the wider issues really of Christchurch, and we see those every day. And I'm well aware that the issue of Housing First, it's not sexy or exciting, but in fact this program is an opportunity for us as a council to decide on what goodwill we can have towards people who are homeless, and what commitment we as a council can make to actually start to eliminate homelessness, because that's the goal of Housing First. It's to end homelessness by 2020. Now, in the report, there's a Part A recommendation for us today, which is from the committee, that we support the program in principle. And it's through a partnership of which our council can be part. We were invited by the housing providers in Christchurch to be part of this program. Central government have also already become involved through the Ministry of Social Development. Now, the committee made a clear decision to seek a separate report and a further report around the funding options for this. So, and in fact, that report will include our internal discretionary funds and external funds. So, in fact, today we need to be clear that, in fact, at this point, the funding for this won't affect they won't affect rates or the long-term plan. There is already funds available for that, and that is something that the committee will look at separately to find the best funding resources available. I just want to say that a real strength of Housing First is that this is the first time that in Christchurch, the excellent housing agencies we have, that in fact they will work in a collaborative and cooperative way. And on top of that, though, they will have the support of the Ministry of Social Development to provide that essential part of those wraparound services, which is easy to say, in terms of actually supporting people to retain their homes on a long-term basis. I'll just make a couple of comments about the Champions Group, because that's referred to in the recommendation. I was asked as a councillor to chair that Champions Group. It's like a form of governance for the project, which will help guide the program. And I think it's important, though, we're aware there's a lot of community representatives and government representatives on that Champions Group. Like the City Mission, which we know well, that Methodist Mission, Comcare, Otautahi Housing Trust, Emerge Aotearoa, and Tofore Ramata, all agencies which we're familiar with. And there's a lot of other NGOs who are also on that Champions Group, as well as key representatives from the government agencies. So we've got the MSD, of course, and we've got Ngāi Tahu, we've got Te Puni Kokiri and Housing New Zealand, the DHB and the mental health component of that, and the police and community corrections. So there's a lot of support in our city for this project. And I think in many ways what I'm describing, it's really like a community of social and helping agencies and government agencies coming together to solve one of the city's saddest challenges. And I think this is an opportunity for our council to do something that in fact we can be proud of. So I'll leave the questions and any other comments.
That. Well, yeah, that was the debate. I mean, let's be honest. So you've moved it and Glenn seconded it. So, I mean, I don't think people need questions. I mean, it's all been debated. It's an approval in principle. So let's just open it up for the debate. You have a question? Well, yeah, no. If it no, I'm not going to stop people asking questions, but I didn't want to interrupt the chair of the committee, who, rather than introducing the report, produced the debate. So anyway, and I actually did think that people didn't have any questions because it's so open and generic. But anyway, Tim, question.
Lester, look, it's totally support in principle. There's no question. I think everyone does. But the comment with regards to not being a burden on the ratepayer, etc. I mean, it's an investment, you can argue as well, both sides of it. But I guess any dollar that we have and every dollar we have comes from a ratepayer. So there's money in the kitty, so to speak. How will that, or could that affect others? And is it possible, because we have a lot of...
There's no funding implications of this decision.
There will be, though.
Not yet.
No, it's not yet, but
No, but they will come back with another paper. It's not today.
Well, it's...
It's not, well, I mean...
Sooner or later there's going to be money discussed, because we have discussed that.
Well, we don't have to. We haven't been asked to fund it.
But the comment was made that it is not going to affect ratepayers.
Okay, so if there is a subsequent paper, I mean, this is why it's out of order, actually, but, you know, if there is a subsequent paper that recommends funding, will you bring a paper that is able to have no rates implications? And if not, why not?
The answer is yes, we can. Yes, we will be bringing a paper to the committee which explores and looks at all the internal options for funding. Some of them won't have rates implications in terms of an increase in rates, but some of the funding, for example, grants funding, obviously does come from rates. So right. I'm not trying to have a bob each way, but we do have to understand that grants funding does come from rates.
Yes.
So therefore, in that respect, it does have a rates implication. Will the options require a rates increase? No.
Right. So they're going to look at allocating, if money is required, because I'm not yet convinced that we need to contribute to this. We've made a great offer in terms of staff support through community governance and development work and the chairing of the Champions Group. So to me, there is no, I haven't actually seen that we've been asked to provide funding. Have we been asked to provide funding?
We've been invited to consider funding in the same way that all the other councils have been.
Does it fall over without it?
Well, no.
Will it not proceed without
it? The answer is, I think the question is, will the program proceed without council funding?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
Yes, thank you.
Just debate
okay.
Or discussion.
Yeah, okay. Question from Sarah, question from Anne, question from Yanni. Everyone's got questions.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to go into the debate?
Well, no, I'm thinking that wait for questions in the debate.
Okay.
So can I just ask then, since funding came up, and well, it did because it's actually in the report. So there was an initial staff recommendation to the Housing Subcommittee on whether it wanted to recommend to Council that it consider $600,000 worth of funding.
Which it didn't.
Which it didn't. But what was the intent of where that would come from? That was going to come from strengthening communities?
No, we haven't discussed that.
Okay.
What we've talked about is what quantum of funding would support the aspect of the program that would be appropriate for council to contribute to.
Yeah.
And that's what we've been asked to go away and do some work on, and we're reporting back on the 4th of April to the committee about.
The report
so
does
that
say...
report...
Yes, the initial report did canvass options, and not options. It canvassed potential sources, but the committee asked us to go away and do more work and think about that, and provide some more advice back to it.
Yeah, because
Yes.
I'd be really wary of taking it from Strengthen Communities when that fund is already completely oversubscribed.
And it'd be fair to say that was the view of the committee.
Great.
Is that right, Chair?
Yeah.
Can I just follow up though that if
Not all the committee.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
So some members of the committee, hence the request for more work.
while there is clearly a potential option which provides council support and staffing those kind of things without potentially grant funding, is at some point, I mean, the work that could be done by the group would be enhanced by council funding and we would get better outcomes. So that would be the desire of the group to have some council funding.
Yes.
Yeah.
So would it be a preference that we simply defer this paper until the full funding proposal comes forward? I mean, is that the alternative?
It would be helpful
Because
to get a
I haven't
steer.
seen any, I haven't seen anything that says that we have to fund it.
Yeah, that's right. It from our point of view, it would be good to get a council decision for the support and principle
Right.
for the program, because it's not just all direct funding related.
No, and we've got staff support coming through this resolution, through its community governance and development work. So, but what I don't want to do is to give people an unrealistic expectation that I will then support a large amount of money going from whatever source it is, particularly the sources that were described in the paper.
And that's the key.
Yeah.
Absolute principle, without question, and support, fantastic, but we've got to be really honest at the very start.
So we should indicate in the resolution that we want
Or may not be.
any funding options to be, you know, they have to be quite,
Yeah. Robust, I mean,
yeah.
yeah, Lester knows where we're coming from, I think. Yeah.
Hey?
What debate?
Answer the question. Ask a question. Well, there was somebody else that was going to ask a question, but was it
Yanni. I think.
Yanni? Ref?
Do you want to go?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess going to the nub of this. Paragraph 5.45, it says a council funding contribution would be additional to what is to be funded by MSD. Council contribution would help enable the initiative to provide a fully wraparound service, while the core multidisciplinary team will be funded through MSD. Funding is not available for community building initiatives. So MSD is funding this core team. So is the question to MSD, you've got this great team, this is going to cure homelessness here, but we believe actually there's a bit missing. Is that what we're saying to them? And therefore we're going to fund it? Or are we saying to them actually you haven't quite got the right program?
Well, the funding from MSD has been negotiated pretty rigorously by the 4 providers, and there's been a lot of debate about what will be included and what won't. What we've heard, and so that's the relationship is between MSD and those 4 providers. We're partnering with the providers, or council would be partnering with the providers to support the program, and they're saying to make it more effective than just the core services, if you were able to complement or provide funding to complement what is provided by, if you will, the core, the effectiveness would be enhanced quite significantly, and that's what we're looking at developing funding options for.
So is MSD saying that they're putting all this funding into this great team, but they don't think it's going to do the job?
No, they're not saying that.
Okay, so we're saying
but there's always a limit to what can be done with the money that's provided, and so the experience that has in Auckland, for example, is the additional work with people who are homeless, or once they've been homed, working alongside those and reconnecting them with communities has a significant effect for not a lot of additional cost. So, I mean, I guess it's the department at some stage says we have to draw the line. We can still get some good housing results. I think everyone will recognise if you can provide a bit more service in the right place, you're going to get better permanent housing results. And that's what this is about. It's about adding to the core program.
So the bit we're saying, which is in 5.47, that our funding would go towards, so $200,000 per year for a community connections engagement worker, community building program and associated costs. So that's the bit that we're putting on top of what MSD is providing?
Yes, that's where we complement the program. The community connectedness part is what typically happens, and it's covered in the paper, that people living on the streets for a long time have a whānau on the street. Once they're housed, if you will, they can quickly become isolated and return to the street. So how do you ensure they remain connected with the people they were and others, a broader connection, as well as provide all the specialist and wraparound services? These people aren't just homeless, they're suffering from a number of attendant issues which perhaps has contributed to their homelessness, oftentimes mental health, oftentimes drug and alcohol addictions. The program is around putting them in a place and supporting them in that place and providing that services.
I mean,
in order to get them to stay there, you need that connection.
The question is, obviously MSD knows that as well.
Yep.
So the simple question is, why is MSD not funding the full
MSD
program?
is providing some contribution to that. This is about complementing that. And that's what I was saying before. The more service and activities we can provide, the greater likelihood of success. Success being that people will stay in those homes longer and ultimately always.
Okay, so what we're saying here is we don't actually have people within council who are already doing community
That's correct.
engagement?
This is not something that's being done by anybody, including in council, and we don't have this, the staff, which are largely in our unit, don't have the skills to do it. The people that are best suited to do this work are often those that have been homeless themselves. So they know what it is like to be placed in a home which everyone says isn't that great, and to feel lonely and isolated. But how do you reconnect with others and participate in the broader community? So the peer workers, as well as the community, if you will, activity worker, are the ones that would be funded. That program would be funded through what it is that the council could contribute.
I just see in the report that this hasn't been through the legal department and it hasn't been through the finance department at council.
Yes, it has been through finance.
It has now? Yes,
it has now been through finance. There was no requirement for it to go through legal.
Right.
And yeah, and the finance simply said there's no money in budget for this.
So is that what's been, has that been amended in here somewhere, or is that just?
The Secretariat note, yeah.
Right, sorry, where, is that? So that's on here, is it?
Report.
Yep.
So are we
oh yeah, and just so just two other questions. One was so from my understanding, there's sort of two models of housing first. One is a dispersed model that's been proposed. The other, which I've seen in Seattle and which personally I have a lot more sympathy for, is you actually have a central place where people are housed. So the issue that you're talking about in terms of people's connection, isolation, and also provision of services is done from a central place. It's got the housing above it. So can you just help me understand why that centralised model was ruled out and why the dispersed model has been favoured by these providers?
Well, the dispersed model was the most common model internationally and is the model in New Zealand. The interesting thing is that the housing that is used is predominantly privately owned, private landlord housing, and it doesn't therefore require capital investment. It also means that people are not always all, if you will, lumped together as those who have the attendant issues. And so I think the success rate is considered, from the evidence we understand, to be better through the dispersed model, and the cost is lower. So that is the model that it has been followed in New Zealand, and it's the model that is considered preferred by the providers,
right.
as I understand it.
And obviously the financial stuff's still got to come back, so it's probably not worth getting into too much questions around that right now. But in terms of the saving of money, my understanding from overseas examples is that there are significant amounts of money saved on the investment that's put into dealing with housing and homelessness this way. So if this program's successful, who's going to save money?
Well, I think the saving is across the board in the sense of currently organisations that we fund through grants do provide support to these people. So there's naturally, if we can significantly reduce, if not eliminate that, then the demands on those services in a reactive way won't be as great. That would be a significant direct saving to the organisations within Christchurch. That will take time.
Right.
And I guess the intangible benefit to the city is that people aren't sitting around on the streets.
Well, there's a number of intangible benefits to the city. One is that people aren't sitting around on the streets, that people aren't in parks, and thus others don't find it a good place to go, all those sorts of things.
Is it fair to basically assume that the people that stand to benefit the most in terms of the reduction of costs would be health, welfare and justice?
Yep.
I don't know why one could assume that. These people typically aren't participants in those services. They're quite disconnected from those services. Quite disconnected.
They don't have identification.
Yeah. This is why the Connections program that we're talking about now will be so important to actually bring them back into, if you will, the community and society.
Yeah. No idea.
Yeah. Without an address, you can't get a benefit.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but I mean, yeah. So it is a huge issue, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't participate, but I think we should think very carefully about the level of funding and its sources. All right. So we'll just open it up for debate. But before we do, I'm just mindful of the time, and I have a departure time. That doesn't matter, but I do want to deal with the ECAN submission before I go, and then there's a couple of items that I want to do so that we can then go into PX, because some people want to go to the same thing I want to go to. So Glenn and then Anne, you wanted to debate.
Well, thank you. If I can offer from a Housing Committee, Subcommittee perspective, just to say that this proposal today is consistent with the housing policy, which seeks to determine where we as council can play a role across the housing spectrum. So as you know, we don't necessarily build all the houses we have in the social housing space, but we have roles to play arguably across that spectrum, and this is one in partnership with government. Over Councillor Johansson's question of overseas models, there's a certain kind of, there will be a kaupapa needed with this, which only relates to our setting here. Many of those without shelter are Māori men, many have dogs. There's a special kind of situational series of issues that we'll need to deal with here in Christchurch. A key word in the debate is chronic, from the Greek chronos, meaning time. So these are long-standing homeless people rather than newly housed, and that will give you an indication over how serious and far-reaching this issue is, which we are endeavouring to grab hold onto. I just got that diagram up there for you, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to indicate where this sits right at the bottom in the physiological needs, the most basic of human needs. Someone said to me once, if you meet people's needs, you'll be successful. I put it to you, this can serve as a measure of success for this council, that we can build or facilitate the flash buildings in the city. We need all that stuff. But actually, what does it all mean if we've still got people sleeping on our streets? So that's my little wee challenge, which I'd like to put to you there. I also think it could serve either that or the 4 well-beings as a framework for subsequent decisions, including financial. There's another Greek word, kairos, which is about time, and it means doing things now. This issue is really pressing. The street count indicates 200 in the CBD, more in the outer suburbs. So it really is urgent. We need to get on with it. It would be good to actually shake hands with government over this and say, yes, we're working with you to address it. It's really serious stuff. So I urge your support for this today.
And
So I've actually privileged to be sitting on a couple of working groups, one that works with street begging and one that works with the street workers, and this is a common theme that's coming through, that we have to have a clearly identified pathway, really, from footpath to whare, I call it, and I think that we've got many different agencies working in this space. We've got lots of resource here. Housing First Initiative, for me, in my understanding, provides glue for all of this to come together and to bring a joined up kind of approach with specialist help to solve this problem of chronic homelessness. Particularly, I think we have an issue with our youth who are finding themselves homeless through lots of different reasons. But I believe that this Housing First Initiative actually provides a shop front and glue to bring all these things together. So I'm very supportive of it, and I think that we will find the money for it because I think it's imperative that we do. And I hope that you will all see that this is an opportunity for Christchurch to actually solve this issue of chronic homelessness by targeting this issue in this specialist way. So I'm hoping that you will all support this initiative.
Dion.
I'm very supportive of this initiative. One of the key elements to the homeless people that I've been seeing on the streets, especially in the central city and Linwood Village and other parts of our city, this issue is a big Māori issue in our country and in Christchurch. And I really want to see this go ahead, but I'm going to light a little fire underneath the belly of it, that it needs to address Māori issues at the heart. And Ngāi Tahu and the Māori agencies that are not necessarily the collective, but they're in the governance groups behind it, need to light a fire under all of their members and actually sort out this Māori problem. Why are we having this in our country at the moment? It's not acceptable when we need to get our Māori people to take leadership on this issue and actually confront it head on and go, we're going to look after our whānau. We're going to take them under our wing and educate them, bring them out of this poverty gap that we've got in our country and actually go, you know what, you're part of New Zealand. We're not Māori, we're not Pakeha, we're not whatever, we're New Zealanders, but this issue seems to be falling into a Māori issue and it needs to be confronted head on. And I really hope that the Housing First will take that on board, because one of the key elements to why these people keep falling into this trap is trust issues. Māori people seem to, we kind of work in a collective in a way, and a lot of these guys that are on the street, the Māori men that have been on the street, they go and get help and then they're turfed out and then they go somewhere else and they say, no, you need this, and they just don't understand or don't have the tools to get them to where they need to go, and then they lose trust of the system. And that trust needs to be built up in such a different way than what is normally done by our processes in local government and central government and other stuff, which is why the other element is really, really important. The other element that's not funded by just getting these people into houses and that specialist support is the trust building for these people. That is the key element to actually making this work. And we're not dealing with the funding side of this today, but that is what will make this succeed. That is what makes us different than everything else that's already out there, because these agencies are already helping people in homeless situations. they're all over the place, and that shopfront is great to actually have a point of contact, but the building the community behind it is absolutely critical, otherwise this will not work. And so hopefully that will come back and we'll find ways to make that work. We already have somebody in our community board, local community board, who does this, Brenda Lowe Johnson with the Homeless Collective, in a small element of her community that she works with, is going out and, you know, she's asking us to help her sometimes to, you know, with money. She gets a bus and goes to the groins and has events for these homeless people. And then they grow that, they build trust with these people that they're working with. So really, you know, that is the key element to this, and hopefully this will go through, I'm very confident, but we need to also work on making sure that that happens as well. So when it comes back, I really want people to think about growing that trust.
Sarah and then Pauline, you've got to end it.
Thank you. I'd like to agree with Councillor Livingston when he says that this is an issue that's really, really pressing, and it is. And when we prioritise what we do as a council, it is looking after people first, in whichever way that might be. In our communities, valuing our volunteers, looking after our most vulnerable, providing children with opportunities for recreation, all of those kind of things should be at the top of our priority list as a council. And so I'm really happy to support this. Housing is a basic need, and not only does it help those who are the most vulnerable sleeping on the streets, but it helps the rest of the city and how we feel about ourselves as a city, and that we value each other, and makes it more equitable. So completely in support of this. A tiny little wordsmithing thing for number 2 might be that we could add to help fund the proposed initiatives, rather than that we fund them completely when we're looking at the funding. If that's okay with the mover and seconder, because we're not even getting a report on funding the whole thing, because we know that MSD is doing that. Okay, it's got a great part. We're only going to be helping if we choose to. So a nod would be helpful if that's okay, but I guess you'll address that. It may not need to be an amendment, but it is really important when we're prioritising things, and I do think that it would be doing really, really good if we had this particular report maybe even before the heritage one, so that when we looked at whether we wanted to spend scarce council resources on funding private property heritage restoration, or potentially on helping people off the streets, that we really could prioritise where that goes. Thanks.
Sorry, who was next?
I think I was.
Pauline.
I just want to say, yes, I support this very strongly. We've had people come in here passionately talking about homelessness, and including homeless people themselves, actually. And I'll look forward to the report coming back through the committee, and if there's a recommendation that perhaps we access some funds from the Community Resilience Partnership Fund, I will not be averse to that either.
Okay. Yanni, sorry, who else was over here? No one? Good. Yanni?
Yeah, I mean, I'm strongly supportive of doing something different than what we've currently been doing. As far back as to when Council gave the grant, the $2 million grant to the City Mission, I raised the idea that we actually look at housing people first as an example of what we should be doing, rather than just continuously providing grants for groups to basically take people in and then have them go out. You know, the idea of night shelters, for example, when people don't have access to a home. So, you know, I think this is long overdue, but is really welcome. And, you know, we can do it differently. I think the discussion around the funding will obviously come back to us, but it is very clear from my understanding from overseas that justice and health and welfare save this substantial sums of money through these types of programs. And it just makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, you know, you just think about the burden on our A&E department at our hospital, or the strain on our mental health resources at the moment. And I would suggest that, you know, there is a spectrum, a wide range of housing for people in terms of being classified as being homeless, and it's, you know, transiency is as much about that as well as addictions and mental health. So this is, I think, a way forward. Again, my preference would have been for a central city site. We've heard the concept of whānau referred to. The research that the board got presented with in the inner city east, I think showed that people wanted to stay together in a community rather than be split up. So I am a little bit cautious about the dispersed model. I know that that has been done overseas and has, there have been examples where it has worked, but I still think that having a central city place where we're integrated with services wrapped around housing on the top. Some of the other really interesting things that have been done are having micro enterprises where people can actually be employed. So you'd have retail and commercial opportunities for those who are being housed as well. And for those of us who have visited some of the people on the street, they've certainly got a wide array of talents, and some of them are very, very creative in terms of being able to make things or produce creative type things as well. So, but this needs to be done, and let's hope that it's a success. And obviously we'll have another debate when it comes back to the funding. But I think this is the idea of having a much more integrated approach to housing is important, and it's not just about housing. I think it's actually about providing people with a space that they feel is a home. That's really important. And I guess just to conclude, those of us who read the newspaper around the person that was taken into the hospital and then discharged and left on a bus stop in our central city, if that doesn't paint a picture of why we need to change and do things differently, I don't know what will. So let's hope that this is the start of something that goes a long way towards addressing this problem.
I think Phil.
Look, I'll try and be brief, but I think there's some really good points have been made around this housing issue. And one thing that stands out, there was reference to the intangible benefits, for example, and I think there's not a council around this table who's is agreeable to the over 170 people in our city being homeless. We certainly have agreement at this table on that, and so we know that this isn't how we want our city to be. I have to say though that the Housing First model is well evidenced. It's had a lot of support in Auckland and from their council, but we can look at those, I guess, details later. The other thing too is councillors might recall that when we did our briefing to the incoming ministers, it was quite clear. We said we would want to support a Housing First initiative, and Glenn has referred to our current policy, which is very clear that we'll work with other agencies to address acute housing and to eliminate homelessness. So I appreciate the debate, and I certainly will appreciate councillors' support to pass the recommendations, and I concur with Sarah's suggestion that we insert the word help in there, because it will be to complement what MSD are doing, and Glenn, you are okay with that too. So thank you.
Right, I shall put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's